Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator at McNally Robinson Booksellers. We're broadcasting live tonight from Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, the homeland of the Métis Nation. Thank you all for joining us here tonight, both live on Zoom, everybody watching on YouTube right now, and all those watching the YouTube stream in the future as well. It's unfortunate that we can't get together in person, but fantastic that we're able to gather from across the country and beyond to celebrate the launch of Mirror's Edge by Alex Passey, which is published by the good folks at Bay Press. Over the course of the evening, there will be an opportunity for questions as time permits. So with that in mind, please do feel free as questions occur to you during the conversation. You can just write them in the Q&A box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Rest assured you will not interrupt the progress at all if you do actually write a question in there. And also feel free to chat with your fellow webinar participants in the chat, which is available just to the side. But I'll be out of your way just back in a little while to let you know about how you can get your hands on a copy of this book. Before I disappear, I just wanted to introduce your official host for this evening. Sean Perrin is a Winnipeg-based videographer and award-winning filmmaker. His short film, Writer's Block, won the 2018 Anti-Racism Arts Festival's 48-hour film challenge. Sean was co-director and co-cinematographer for a Bell MTS docuseries called No Roadblocks, Just Detours, released 2020. He was also credited for his work as an editor on the CBC executive-produced short film Ring Warriors, produced by Scott Carnegie. Sean was a camera operator for the MTS Stories from Home feature film Staging the Band, produced by Chris Gaudry. But he is here this evening to affectionately interrogate Alex Passey about his novel, Mirror's Edge. Please join me in virtually welcoming Sean.
Thanks, John. Super glad to be here. Quite the introduction. All that film experience and zero experience hosting a live stream book launch. So we're going to muddle our way through. Alex, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself and join us in here. I've known Alex for, I don't know, what do you say, probably like 18 years now, since early high school.
Yeah, I think around 18, 19 years is when we met.
I remember when I was getting you to do the reference on my passport, I was like, one of the questions is, how long have you known this person? And you were like, yeah, probably like 17 or 18 years. And I was like, what? That's crazy. Time doesn't fly that fast. Come on.
Apparently it does.
But yeah, no, it's cool that even though we're in the midst of a crazy pandemic right now, that we can still get together and celebrate the release of your book. On that note, I know you've had a little bit of trouble in the past with cancellations. Why don't you talk about that just to get us going?
Yeah, back in September, the end of September, we were supposed to do a big, exciting event at the Wolseley's Farmers Market, me and a couple of other writers. I think I saw Ariel Gordon in the chat there posting things, so hi to her. It turned out that after that weekend, that very weekend, they announced stricter COVID restrictions, which specifically kept us from having the outdoor event that we thought we had planned around the COVID restrictions. And so, yeah, just a day or two away from the event, and we had to turn around and cancel it. So here we are on the internet, where hopefully everyone's being safe from COVID.
Hopefully, yeah. And yeah,
hopefully there's no big COVID super spreader watch parties right now.
Yeah, just running from house to house. So obviously we're here to talk about Alex's new book, Mirror's Edge. I've got it right here. But before we dive into that, we have Alex and I have figured out a way to make it just a little bit more interactive for you folks out there watching. We have Mirror's Edge themed cocktails for you. So this one right here is called the Sarah, and it's a double of gin poured over ice with a little bit of lime juice and some bitters, and then finished off with some citrus Perrier, but you can literally use like any kind of sparkling water that you want. And the reason why this is the Sarah is because it's light and it's exciting and it's breezy and natural until you have a few, and then it sucker punches you in the face, and the next thing you know, you're waking up in the morning, and that is so Sarah, and you'll find out why later on in the event here as we go. Alex, do you have a Mirror's Edge themed cocktail as well?
I do. This is a screwdriver a la Wrath, but it's, you could really make anything a la Wrath as long as it's mostly booze, any booze if you're choosing. But yeah, if you guys have any of your own Mirror's Edge themed cocktails of your choice, feel free to send us the recipe, especially if you happen to have a take on Sarah's tea that transported Wrath into her world. Definitely extra bonus points for hallucinogenic extra dimensional beverages.
Also, bonus points for the Wrath cocktail if you find a old bottle of booze, maybe under your bed or under your couch or somewhere in a dingy corner. Those are also bonus points.
That is the way he likes it.
So I thought I'd kick it off with a bit of a review here. For a debut novel, this book should probably not be as good as it is. Passey's narrative and prose are years ahead of where one would expect him to be. And with another book in the works already, we can assume his writing will get better still. I believe Mirror's Edge to be a story of rigid dichotomies and of new beginnings. Passey spins up a main character who has no business being a hero, even in his own story. A man who's smart, but hides his intellect behind a callous sarcasm. A man who knows the world is fucked and hides it behind consumption and addictions. Meanwhile, his counterpart is a woman whose wholesomeness and innocence is a carefully crafted armor plate protecting a rebellious core. And this dichotomy doesn't feel forced in the slightest. And when it comes to beginning again, there are more than a few examples in this book. If you've ever had to start your life over, then it's very likely that something awful and tragic has happened to or around you. Starting from scratch is a darkly terrifying thing, and it doesn't always work out. Beginning again isn't just a sigh followed by a deep breath and a step forward into a warm sunrise of change, but instead is a confusing sea of self-doubt and soul-searching, followed by a raft of razor wire that pierces you between the ribs until eventually you land on a beach of washed-up plastic garbage. It's a process that takes Wrath an entire novel to figure out. The narrative in Mirror's Edge grabs the readers from the very start and launches them into a world that's well beyond ours, and yet not at all alien. From there, we go to another world that's the complete opposite, and yet somehow shouldn't be as alien as it is. The pacing left this reader unable to guess where we would be on the next page, never mind the next chapter, all the while maintaining a sense of control that doesn't leave the reader exhausted. Meanwhile, the prose marches with a playful gait. In spite of dealing with some serious social issues in Mirror's Edge, Passey's prose never misses an opportunity to weave in similes for color and stamp in dark humor with a professional edge that can only come with the type of personality that's able to see grave despair all around us all the time, but knows he has to make the best of it somehow. So with that, Alex, why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I just want to say, I hope you know that after that review, you definitely just roped yourself into publicly reviewing all of my books henceforth. So
I'd be glad to do it.
But yeah, by day, when I'm not writing, I do the letter carrier thing for Canada Post by day. By night, I guess I'm a writer, even though actually my writing takes place mostly in the morning. So I guess by day, I'm a letter carrier, and by earlier in the day, I'm a writer. But other than that, I live here in Winnipeg with my two daughters, Chelsea and Calliope, and my wife, Faith, along with an assortment of other furry companions. Yeah, we don't do a whole lot these days other than spend time with each other around the house. So I get a lot more writing done than I used to. And hopefully someday I get to have some sort of a social life again and, see all of you people.
Here's hoping for that social life again.
Yeah.
Speaking of your cadre of furry friends, one of which got top billing on your acknowledgements. Do you want to give a shout out to that person?
Well, I mean, we don't get to pick our muses, right? And anybody who's met Linty, you know that she's top billing and everything.
Linty is a little gray cat for anyone who hasn't had the honor. Linty is the bright spot in my life, even though she's not even my cat. So, and
we all learn a lot from Linty.
That's right, we certainly can. And funnily enough, your wife got last billing on the acknowledgements. Explain yourself.
Well, you know, they say save the best for last. Some people
Sure,
say
sure.
that, I hear.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly what that was, wasn't it? Just kidding. Love you, Faith.
Hi, honey.
So, okay. When did you know that writing was in your future? And I'm not necessarily talking about writing a book per se, just writing in general. When did you know that that was a thing you were going to do?
Well, I always really liked to read. My parents, they always encouraged me to read a lot. They'd put me to bed at a reasonable hour, but then they would always let me stay up considerably later as long as I was reading in my bed. So that's helped foster a lifelong love of reading and books and the written word. And eventually, at a certain point, you kind of realize that somebody's got to write those things, and it might as well be me, right? So why the heck not? Even though, you know, it takes a long time to actually, well, when you first start writing everything, you think that you write is good, but eventually, because everybody around you encourages you, but eventually it turns out that it actually becomes true. So yeah, I'd say probably right around the end of high school, I started writing actual literary stories and stuff like that. And God, looking back at them now, they're god awful and hopefully buried forever. But I would say right around then is where I convinced myself that writing was a thing that I loved, that I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Well, my bad writing goes back a lot more recently than yours. I was in college 6 years ago or so, and I look back at some of the assignments that I did then, and it's same kind of feeling. I'm like, I don't ever want to look at that again. But walk me through a little bit of the types of writing that you did. You said you did literary, but like, what was it? Short stories, poetry? I know you did some journalism maybe later on in life, but what kind of things did you write?
Well, the first thing I started to write was probably songs. I remember discovering a punk, political punk like Anti-Flag and Propaganda, and I decided that I had to throw my 2 cents into that cannon, but it turned out that my grade 10 grasp of world politics maybe precluded me from making too much of a contribution there. Anyway,
so much life experience.
Yeah, that kind of fizzled out. Though eventually I did start writing some raps. Shout out to Ill Street if there's any of you ninjas out there. But yeah, that went a little bit better. But I still write the occasional rap from time to time, but actually rapping, that's never been my cup of tea either. So yeah, I did some journalism and stuff for the Manitoban. I used to write a lot of letters to the editor and to the Free Press. And yeah, that's all well and good, but it's also exhausting. And there's something so much more cathartic about writing artistically, like poetry and literature. So that's definitely where I've grounded myself more for the time being, though I'll still throw out an opinion time to time, as I'm sure most people know.
I wouldn't know. It's not like I follow you on Facebook. So poetry is something that you've delved into more recently. Then, have you published anything, or where, like,
I did have a
someone
poem.
could find?
Yeah, I had a poem that won the Manitoban poetry competition 2014, I think it was. I think that was the last thing that I had published. I assume it's still online somewhere. But yeah, most of my poetry is more for like a close friend base and family and stuff like that. I have submitted some stuff here or there. I hadn't had a ton of success, but I still, that's more of a labor of love than anything.
Well, I know you have one piece of poetry who a very handsome filmmaker decided to make a film around. So there, yes. you're also a film writer.
I may have forgotten that one. Yeah. I guess so. My credentials just keep on growing. Who knew?
That's great. We're discovering them one at a time here. Okay, so I want to talk about the process a little bit of writing something like a novel. I mean, besides short stories, or compare them to short stories a little bit, and even poetry too. Like, what kind of processes and where does inspiration come for short stories and poetry versus something like a novel?
Well, for the difference between a short story and a novel, I think I can't remember where I read it, but I'm pretty sure it was Neil Gaiman who said that when you're making a short story, it's kind of like you just go up to your kitchen cupboards and you see what ingredients you have in, you slap them all together, you take a weekend, you sit down and hammer it out at the keyboard. And at the end of a few days, you sit back and see what you've got, and you've got what you've got. But a novel is a lot more, you need to have a game plan. It's more like building a building. Like you need a floor plan, you need an architectural, or you need a team of architects. You need to know what you're doing. And you can't just set out and plunge into it, because before you know it, you end up just like halfway into a novel, 40,000, 50,000 words, and you have nowhere else to go. You've just written yourself into a corner, and you end up just having to scrap it all. And I've had to do that several times. And after a while, you get pretty tired of that. And you realize that a good way to do it is to start with the beginning and figure out where you're going in the end, and then just cram those two things together as best that you can. Because trying to write towards an ending can just leave you rambling with no completely aimlessly.
Yeah, and I like that metaphor that you used too, like building a building. One of the most important things, even before you, well, maybe not before you get your team of architects in there, like they probably are the ones who do this, but you need like a good foundation, right? So like in the process of writing your book, what was that foundation? Like, what did it actually look like?
The foundation for this book, well, it's a bit piecemeal, because I had the character of Wrath for a long time. When I was probably like in my late teens, early 20s, I had the idea of a character like Wrath, but that's just I had nowhere to put him, because having a guy that's thinks he's smarter than everybody, drinks a lot, is really a slave to his vices, is very cynical and has no patience for the world he lives in. When you build a story just around a character like that, that's kind of a dime a dozen. Every angsty white male has got a story like that in them. And I had Wrath, but I didn't really have a place to put him until I came up with Sarah's World. And Sarah's World, all pristine and very divine and self-assured, very into itself. It seemed like the perfect place, the perfect china shop to set the bull that is Wrath, to really mess things up and cause a lot of conflict.
Yeah, it's those dichotomies that I was talking about before, right? Like this whole book is just rife with them. We've got a question coming in from the Q&A, and folks, please keep sending your questions to us. This is really great. There's nothing better than live interaction with an audience. So keep sending in these questions. But George wants to know, when did the premise of this book first take shape, and when did you first put pen to paper?
The first time I put pen to paper, well, I guess I'll start with the premise. The premise was when I came up with Sarah's World, I guess, because I was reading the self-help book, spiritual self-help book. I won't drop the name, because there's clues in the book but that'll let you know at least who the writer is. But I read it, and it seemed like a pretty good way of getting around personal anxiety. But then there was a philosophy in it that made me think that it wasn't very applicable in a broader sense. It's not socially applicable to like a broader community. It's just very individually based. And so I went into look into it a bit more, and I found the online community that really liked this book and the basic philosophy surrounding it. And these people just seemed they had this idea of enlightenment that they themselves possessed, but they were so exclusionary to everybody that wasn't inside. And it was so weird to see these people that thought they were like unified with all things and perfectly at peace, but also completely casting out anybody who didn't fit into the perfect form of enlightenment. And so I kind of thought that was the very good basis for Sarah's World. As to when I set pen to paper, that I think, like when I first started writing this, had to at least be like 7 or 8 years ago. I think I wrote the first several chapters while I was working nights at Domo, actually. So I think a good chunk of this was actually written in a gas station in the middle of the night. But then I put it down for a while because, well, I had to quit Domo and actually get a life for a while. So I went off to Europe and kind of set it aside. And then after I met Faith and settled down and everything, I picked the book back up and started to write it again. I think the total writing time probably only took me maybe like 10 months to a year, but it was spread over several years because I kept on picking it up and putting it down.
Not exactly a traditional method of going about writing a book, would you say?
No, not at all.
That's all good. We all get there when we get there, right? And that's
I've never been much of a traditionalist.
No, definitely not. That's why we love you. So what happened after your manuscript was finished? So like all that journey that it took you, all that process, all that thinking, and finally now you've got what you think is a book, but it's not a book yet, is it? What happens after that?
Rejection. Lots and lots of rejection. I'm so glad that I live in the age of digital submissions where you're sending things out to people over emails. Because, oh boy, if I had gotten all of those rejection letters back in the physical mail, and I'm totally the kind of masochist that would like save them all on my desk and just put them there. And just to have that pile sitting there probably would have really dissuaded me from sending it out. But I did keep sending it out, and eventually, because that's what you got to do. And maybe you get some tips from publishers here and there. That was actually the first thing that Matt did when he said he was tenuously accepted it, but he wanted me to do a rewrite, and he gave me some good notes, and then I made it all the better when I sent it back to him again. So yeah, you gotta have a tough skin in order to keep on doing that. But yeah, a lot of rejection. You got to brace yourself for that.
I feel you, dude. I've had more rejection for film pitches this year than ever before in my entire life. So yeah, I'm on that rejection train as well. That's actually all the
sweeter when you finally get it then.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah. No, I think that's actually not a bad idea though. I should maybe save all my rejection emails and put them in a file. And then every time I sit down to write creatively, just open those up and look at them first. And then that'll be some kind of like weird catharsis for me so that I can actually clear my brain. And anyways.
Yeah. I mean, whatever gets you there.
So you said the word rewrite. Now that sounds absolutely daunting, was it?
Yeah, it can be. But you also have all the material right there, right? You just really need to take it and read it and think, if I was going to just write that again from scratch, is there anything major that I would change? And almost always there is, because you're never done editing. Like, honestly, if you gave me that book back again right now, I would probably make a ton of changes. But there does come a certain point where you've got to just, put your stamp on it, shove it aside, and say, okay, this is what I'm putting out into the world, because I have to write something else. That's the thing. All those ideas that you want to cram into there, they'll fit just as good as in the next work that you want to work on. So sometimes you do have to just force yourself to move on.
So with that, what's it like working with a publisher?
Oh, well, with Matt in particular, it's been great. At Bay Press, I have absolutely no complaints. The editing process has been great. They've been there for any questions that I had, because this is the first book that I've published. And yeah, so they've helping set stuff like this up. I could not be happier with the way this has all gone. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's not as daunting as I thought it was going to be originally, because, you think you get your book into a publisher and then you think it's just going to be high stress the entire time, because this is the person who's finally accepted your book. So there's a lot of pressure on the situation. Yeah. But I can't speak for other publishers, but I know at Bay Press in particular it's been nothing but ease working with them.
Nice. Yeah, that must be a real stress reliever at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely. I can, it's all too easy to envision high stress situations where you've got contentious battles with editors and a publisher who wants to change everything in your book, and that's things that would make a good TV show, but that hasn't worked that way in real life so far. So thankfully, not.
Plus, you've got this really awesome cover design that if you had self-published, you probably wouldn't have this shiny, reflective cover. So there's another bonus to working with an actual producer or publisher.
Absolutely. I love the cover work and the graphic design. It all turned out so much better than I could have hoped it would.
Super awesome. So give us the synopsis, give us the lowdown without spoilers. What's Mirror's Edge about?
Well, I guess it's Wrath. He's got a lot of problems living in his hyper-capitalist world where branding is kind of a religion and technology has really invaded every aspect of his life. He drinks and he fucks his way through life as best as he can, trying to numb the knowledge that he just doesn't fit in his world at all, until he finds himself transported over to Sarah's world. And it seems like the world that he always wanted to live in, just looking after yourself and, living off the land. hunting, fishing, gardening. You're constantly occupied by tasks that make your life feel fulfilled because you're actually sustaining yourself rather than sustaining some big faceless corporation that doesn't even know you exist, and they tell you that that's what society is. But yeah, eventually, as you learn more about Sarah and her world, you do ultimately come to the realization that people are ultimately people, no matter where they are. And I try to explore some the themes of tribalism and the way that we like to make others of the people that don't quite fit in our chosen tribes. And yeah, so eventually you kind of learn that Sarah's world has its own dark secrets of its own.
Yeah, it's kind of like one world is immediately kind of shows itself as a dystopia, and the other world immediately shows itself as the utopia. But the more you read on, the less that becomes the truth, and the lines between utopia and dystopia sort of tend to blur. Is that kind of, am I reading that correctly?
No, absolutely. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And I think that certain people, if you come to this book, I think with just a straight frame of mind, eventually you will come to see that both of them can be a utopia or a dystopia, depending on your own personal perspective. And that's what I really wanted to do, is just leave things open-ended and maybe reveal things to people about themselves as they read, and how they maybe I've had people that think that Wrath is a realist, or that Wrath is a coward. I've had people think that Sarah was the hero. I've heard people think that Sarah's a lunatic. So it's really an open-ended thing, and I think ultimately the thing that informs how a person reacts to these characters in these places is just their own personal perspectives of the world.
Yeah, and they're both kind of, I don't know how to exactly say this, but they're both kind of their own worlds too, right? Like in the same way that like Wrath's world appears one way, and then, you know, maybe it's not as simple as we immediately think it is, but and then Sarah's world appears one way, and then the more you dive into Sarah as a character too, you know, she sort of reveals something else to her. This is really hard to do without giving away spoilers. I feel like we should do another show in like 6 months from now where we actually dissect these characters in these worlds, like with full-blown spoilers, so that, you know, we could actually get into it. But yeah, so anyways, tell me about Wrath. Like, he's a bit of a dick, right?
He's definitely a dick. I think I did conceive him at a time in my life where I was probably a bit of a dick. I think most of us, well, less of a dick. I'm more conscious of my dickishness. But yeah, he's definitely got that that swagger that I think most young men have, and some never lose. And yeah, just in the world that he lives in, he kind of withdraws into himself. And so he tries to dull that self-perception that I think he really likes himself, but he doesn't really like the world that he's into. He doesn't feel like he can flourish. But at the same time, when you can't flourish, you end up not liking yourself either. So he ends up numbing everything.
He's definitely not full despair. Like you do see some hope in him, and yeah, and like that kind of becomes more evident sort of as you read on. Like at the beginning, he just seems like a well of darkness and despair, but you know, the more that he develops, you know, you learn that that's not quite the case. He's a little bit more redeemable as you go on, right?
Yeah, I do think that he redeems himself quite a bit when he sees that the world isn't there's more to the world than just his little narrow box that he lives in. Well, maybe his world too, but mostly when he sees Sarah's world and just sees that humans and human nature is a little bit more vast than the narrow paradigm that the people of his world exist in.
And with Sarah too, like there's similar things going on with her character development as well. And I feel like if you were to draw their arc, right, as a line, it would make an X sort of, right? Where, and there is a point where they meet at the middle. I think they meet in the middle where they're like harmonizing and they're in tune with each other, right? But then
they believe each other is the solution to all of their problems, that they can not only their problems but their world's problems. So,
and it was like such a happy ending, like in the middle of the book, and I was like, no, end it here. But then the divergence happens, and just like what happened with Wrath, going in one direction, Sarah almost goes, would you say, in the opposite direction?
In the opposite direction, it's tough to say because I feel like Wrath, that's very hard to line to walk without giving a spoiler away. You know what?
I know.
I'm gonna have to go no comment on that one because the only way I can think of to answer that accurately is to give a big thing away, and I'm gonna
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, let's talk about the worlds. The worlds play a huge part in this story. And obviously we've already touched on it a little bit, but just like describe Raft's world and where the inspiration came from for it.
Well, the inspiration is, I think it's pretty blatant. It's there's so many things. And when I started writing this, it seemed at least a little bit futuristic, but now it's almost like we're living in it more day by day, that it's almost like, oh, this is only like a decade or two away with the way that technology pervades us in a way that's almost becoming transhumanist. We've got Fitbits on our arm counting the hours that we sleep and measuring our biorhythms all the time. And you just know that health insurance companies would love to have that data in order to charge us premiums based on our own personal behaviors. Right. And it seems a little bit closer every year that goes past. So I'd say, how can you not see Wrath's world coming just by looking around us?
No social commentary in Wrath's world whatsoever, right? Okay,
so pulled it out of a hat completely.
Yeah. So Sarah's world is sort of the opposite. It's kind of like this natural sort of utopia, but it's also got its own sort of ugly, hidden tale to tell. Describe for the audience Sarah's world.
Well, Sarah's world is a lot like a place just the Industrial Revolution never really happened. It's like humanity discovered this sort of, they went a lot more spiritual than the people of the Wrath's material world went. So they ended up just making little log cabins to live in, spent a lot of their time meditating, communing with what they call the collective consciousness that actually does seem to have applicable divine powers here on Earth. And there's a strong sense of rugged individualism there, while also being bonded through this spiritual divine energy. And I thought that was a pretty good dichotomy to throw in there too, just the way that as much as they're all connected and communing through this thing that they think binds them all together, they're also all desperately alone and separated from each other. There's not really a lot of more physical connection there in their community. So yeah, that's a lot of the basis of Sarah's world. That's like I said before, I kind of came up with it when I was going into that spiritual self-help community thing, and they seemed to be fancy themselves very enlightened while also just completely eschewing anybody that did not fit into their mold of what enlightenment was.
It almost sounds like toxic enlightenment. I don't know if that's a term, but I think it should be.
I think a lot of people would say that should be a term, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got some questions coming in from the Q&A. My mom, hi mom, she wants to know, are the characters based on real people?
I mean, as much as, there's a little piece of, not like people in my life or anything. I really... No, nobody in my life, because I feel like that as soon as you start getting into that sort of thing as a writer, you've always got something to answer for at the end of the book, because once you start writing a character, they tend to take a life on their own. And sometimes those lives aren't entirely flattering. So when you tell somebody that a character is based on them and then they turn around and, like cheat on their husband or, kill their dad or something, and then you gotta be like, oh, what do you think of me?
Slippery slope, man.
Yeah, exactly. But I'd say like when you're writing, all the characters are a little piece of you've got to be able to at least embody them in some state, to have a state of empathy where you at least understand the character that you're writing. So yeah, I try to draw from that more than the external, because that just seems like a big old messy kettle of fish.
Another question here from the audience from Taylor. So Wrath has been in a character in your mind for a long time. Have you had Sarah in your mind for a while as well, or was she only created when you discovered her world?
Sarah was definitely a byproduct of her world. I almost wanted to make her like the anti-Wrath in order to be in a world, like, but also at the same time kind of embody what Wrath was in his world. Just she doesn't quite fit into her world. She, except for rather than being like Wrath and being defeatist, she is very, very ambitious in wanting to create a better world for herself and well, I don't want to get into that because that's a spoiler, but
It's so
but
hard.
but she is very much dedicated to making the world a better place rather than collapsing in on herself in sort of defeatism.
Another one from your wife. She's chiming in here. Which world would you prefer to live in? That is a super good question, actually.
That is a very good question.
Good luck.
I don't know. Oh, I've got to go with Sarah's world, but I don't know if that, I think that's just an answer for me personally. I'm not saying that that's the better world, because I do think that it's, once you read into the book a little bit, you can see that you learn more about the dark side that we're not getting into there. But I also think that I personally would probably thrive there a little bit better than I would in Wrath's world. And that's just my personal preference. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, that's a tough one too. Like, I want to say Sarah's because I want to, tell myself that I can be rugged and I can get my hands dirty and like grow shit. But like, I don't think that's me, like I want my booze. I want my media, I want to, like, my job is to make commercials for companies. So like, I couldn't make a commercial in Sarah's world. I guess I could, like weave stuff and make pots and whatever, but like that would be way less fun to me. So yeah, I think I would have to choose Wrath's world. As greasy as it is, I feel like I would thrive there a lot more than I would in Sarah's world.
Well, you're always welcome to come over, and I'll catch you a fish if you weave me a basket.
We could have some tea.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. There's always the tea to bring the world together.
That's right. From Jesse Schofield, who is your biggest writing inspiration?
Oh, biggest writing inspiration. Oh man, I mean, if I'm being honest, from where I started, I've got to give it to Stephen King. Stephen King, I used to just read. I probably read like 20 Stephen King books before I like read even like 2 by another major adult author, because I discovered Stephen King young and I just started devouring them immediately. But yeah, so formation wise, yeah, but other than that, I'd probably say once you get into my next book, it'll be a lot more apparent. Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time. It's definitely a big influence on my fantasy writing, and my fantasy writings are bigger and longer, so I'm going to say they're more important.
I would tend to disagree. I'm not a fantasy guy myself, but stay on the sci-fi, and I'll be your biggest fan. This one's in the same.
Sci-fi coming too. Yeah.
All right, good. This one's in the same vein from Natalie. Is there a writer you emulate?
I think there's a lot of writers that I try to emulate. Because every time you read a new book, I try to read a diverse array of authors, because I think that it's important. Every single time you read a new author, you bring a piece of yourself back, themselves back from the story, and you can incorporate it into you. You learn a lot, not just about their form and their style of writing, but also the place and the time that they're writing from. Like reading Dostoevsky and learning about late 19th century Russia is a great thing. And I think Dostoevsky's characters, if you read any of them, I think there's a big chunk of that in Wrath, just the kind of malaise and just the moral quandaries that his characters are always going through, but also that it also helps when you read them from a different time and place, because then when you stick them into the contemporary things, people can't even tell that you're emulating Dostoevsky. So yeah, I think that's, but who do I emulate the most? I'd probably say Robert Jordan again. So when you read my next, I feel like I should be talking about this book more, but I feel like that when my next fantasy one comes out, people are going to read that and they're going to be like, oh, this is a lot like Robert Jordan. This one less so. I feel like this one's a lot more of a unique work, and that's why I really like Mirror's Edge too.
Nice. Yeah, well, let's get back to the book then. There's some more questions here that are very, very book derivative. From Faith again. Faith, you're getting 2 here. You must be someone special. I don't know.
Can we kick her out?
We should actually. Booted. Which character do you identify more with? And be careful, this could have ramifications for after we are off screen.
I mean, I've got to say Wrath. As much as I want to say Sarah, I definitely do. I think Sarah's a very valuable character, and I strive to be like her in certain ways. But I also think that the even-keeled response, it's very hard to give you my reasoning for why this is without giving away the ending of the book. But so thanks, honey, for giving me this tightrope to walk. But yeah, I would ultimately say Wrath, partly because I think just his interactions of living in a world that's a lot more contemporary to ours, that I just relate to him more because that's just the world he lives in, and that's the world that I live in. So it's easier to relate to him. Sarah's struggles are kind of alien to me, to be frank. I don't live in that world, and as far as I can tell, there's no divine magic fueling our world. I've proved me wrong on that one, though.
Good luck. Good luck proving. Yeah, no, but I would also have to say that I more identify with Wrath as well. It's just way easier. And for like the first 4 chapters, I felt like I was reading about myself anyway. And I think that anyone who is like friends with us or like who lives a similar lifestyle to us will also feel the same way. So, you know. We got one more question here from the Q&A, and that's from Jess. Was there a pivotal aha moment while writing, when you stumbled across a plot point and chose to go a certain way with the story, or was it always quite constructed in your mind? So did you have like that fork in the road and you're like, I could go this way or that way, or were you always plowing straight forward?
I was, that's the thing, when I said earlier that you come up with the beginning and the end, the middle is always just a bunch of aha moments, like aha after aha, until you finally find yourself somewhere close enough to the end that you can steer it towards that end that you were going for. I would say the big aha moment where I realized where I was going to start wrapping up the book was right around when I introduced the Max and Shay at the end, when the second time that Wrath came back, without giving up too much about what the hopefully the person, Jess, who's asked the question, has read the book and knows what the heck I'm talking about. But yeah, I would say it would be the introduction of Shay and the Max, when I realized they had their big philosophical conversation. And I think Sarah had her aha moment there too. And just so happened that our ahas kind of coincided.
Nice, well said. And one other one just popped up here. I think that this will probably be the last Q&A that we do, but from Sierra, how long did it take you to write this whole book?
From beginning to end, the entire process. Well, it's like I said earlier, I'd say that the thing was about 10 months of actual sitting down to writing time, maybe a year. But let's see, from 2014, I would say maybe I was writing it in Domo, and then I think I finished it probably around 2018. So it's four years of life, probably about a year of writing.
I find it interesting, just going back to the last question though, I find it super interesting. And you've said this before in like earlier too, that you kind of, your structure was you had the beginning and you had the ending, and then the middle was kind of what was kind of up for grabs. Is that like a standard novel writing sort of approach, or is that just like specific to you?
No, I think that that's actually kind of frowned upon. Yeah, I don't know. I don't talk to a ton of other novelists or anything, and most of the writing books that I've read shy back from giving. Well, there's some writing books that'll be like, this is how you do it. You write a draft and da, 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 da. None of them give you as piecemeal of a thing. It's just like have a beginning, have an end, and have at the middle. But yeah, I think most of the books that I've read by actual like writers like Neil Gaiman and Stephen King, they're a lot more vague about their writing process sort of things. They'll just more give you basic tips. So as far as I know, nobody does it like that. But honestly, I think that's the most fun, because if you just came in with a basic outline, you're just there's none of those aha moments that we were just talking about. I like to be surprised by characters. I like them to develop a mind of their own, and I like them to drive the story.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I don't know if I could create a narrative that way. Like I don't know if you can see behind me, but there's a whiteboard here with a bunch of chicken scratches all over it. This is actually the second iteration of the whiteboard for a film that just got canceled because of Code Red, but I was developing it for about 2 months, right? And the first iteration of that whiteboard had lines, right? And I was literally drawing out my narrative arc, and I had my A line and my B line, and I had all the events going along the lines very chronologically, right? And like, that's kind of how I have to do it. I have to start from the beginning. I have to know who my characters are and what their struggles are, and then I have to see it visually across a line like that. And and like hearing you talk about like doing it from like the beginning and the end, and then like kind of coming up with the middle as you go, that kind of blows my mind, to be honest. It's so antithetical to how I would do it that it's just kind of weird.
Yeah, different mediums, they require different processes, that's for sure.
I suppose that's true, but like at the end of the day, we're all just weaving stories, right? Whether it's fact or fiction, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah. Interesting
totally.
though. Cool, man. Well, I think this has been super fun. Do you have anything that you think we missed that you want to talk about?
No, I guess we've covered pretty much everything that I can think of. So I guess
Well, everything that we can without giving away the book, really.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I guess just thank everybody for coming out. It's been a lot of fun. It went smoother than I possibly could have hoped. If you knew how much my heart was in my throat all day, you would be shocked how well this went. But yeah, no, I think it went pretty good. And thanks everyone for coming out. You've made this a great night and very special. And I hope you enjoy the book.
Tell us where we can buy it.
I think John's doing that afterwards.
Oh, is John doing that? Okay, John, take it away for us, man. Thanks everyone for joining us. This has been real fun.
Perfect. Well, thank you both very much. That was an excellent conversation. Copies of Mirror's Edge are available at McNally Robinson Booksellers. We may be closed to the public, but we're available for curbside pickup. We courier our books within Winnipeg. We also deliver books both nationally and internationally. So we've got plenty of copies of Mirror's Edge, as you can see behind me. So feel free to give us a shout, and we'll make sure that one of these gets into your hands. I'd like to thank the publisher at Bay Press for making this evening possible by publishing this book in the first place. So thank you kindly to Matt, Alana, and the whole crew there. Thanks so much to Sean Perun for hosting this event. Check out his work at seanperun.com, all of his video work, commercial, and his music videos. And of course, thanks to Alex Passey for writing this book and giving us a reason to virtually gather here tonight. This video is going to remain up on YouTube, so feel free to share it around or check it out again if you'd like to watch. And otherwise, thanks all for spending time with us tonight, both now and in the future, to anybody watching the YouTube feed then. Have an excellent evening. Take care.